He stood there in that grocery store checkout line, counting crumpled dollar bills with shaking hands while his daughter tugged at his worn jacket. The cashier's impatient sigh cut through the air. The people behind him shifted their weight, checking their phones, pretending not to notice his embarrassment. That moment, that awful moment of public shame, happens to struggling parents every single day across this country. But what happened next in that ordinary supermarket? It would become a turning point that nobody, absolutely nobody, could have predicted. Before we continue, I want to know where you're watching this from. Are you from the USA, the UK? Drop your city in the comments right now. This story touches on something universal, something that crosses every border and every community. Whether you're in Los Angeles, London, Mumbai, or anywhere else, what you're about to hear will shake you. So tell me, where are you from? Comment below. Marcus Thompson was 32 years old when his world fell apart. Not slowly, not gradually, but in one devastating week that left him gasping for air. His wife, Jennifer, had walked out on a Tuesday morning. She left a note on the kitchen counter, right next to the unpaid electricity bill and their daughter Emma's half-eaten bowl of cereal. The note said she couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't handle the financial pressure, the constant stress, the feeling of drowning. She needed to find herself. She needed space. Marcus read that note 17 times that first day. He kept thinking he'd misunderstood something, that there was a hidden message he was missing. But there wasn't. Jennifer was gone. She'd taken her clothes, her laptop, and apparently her responsibility to their 7-year-old daughter. That same week, Marcus lost his job. The construction company he'd worked at for 9 years shut down operations. No warning, no severance package, just a text message from his supervisor saying the site was closed effective immediately. 13 guys, all let go in a single afternoon. Marcus had sat in his truck in that empty parking lot for 2 hours, unable to process what was happening. He had $843 in his checking account. The rent was $1,200. Emma needed new shoes because she'd outgrown her old ones. The electricity bill was past due. His truck needed an oil change and probably new brake pads based on the grinding sound it made every time he stopped. Marcus had always considered himself a survivor. He'd grown up in foster care, bounced between 7 different homes before aging out of the system at 18. He'd learned to depend on himself, to expect nothing from anyone. But this was different. This wasn't just about him anymore. Emma didn't understand why her mother had left. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home, kept leaving drawings under Jennifer's pillow, kept setting a place for her at their small dining table. Marcus didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her mother chose to leave? That she wasn't enough to make her stay. The first month was brutal. Marcus applied to 47 jobs. He heard back from 3. 2 turned him down after the interview. 1 offered him part-time work at a warehouse for $11 an hour, no benefits. He took it. He didn't have a choice. He started cutting corners everywhere he could. They ate a lot of rice and beans. He told Emma they were on an adventure, trying foods from different countries. She believed him because she was 7, and she still believed her father could fix anything. He stopped buying coffee. He unplugged everything in the apartment when they weren't using it. He walked to work when he could, saving gas money, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The people in their apartment building started looking at him differently. Mrs. Chen from apartment 3B, who used to smile and ask about Emma, now quickly locked her door when she heard him coming. The building manager, Tony, started leaving passive-aggressive notes about the rent. First they were polite reminders, then they became warnings, then they became threats. Marcus felt himself becoming invisible. That's the thing about being poor in America, in any country really. People stop seeing you. You become an inconvenience, an uncomfortable reminder of how close everyone is to falling through the cracks themselves. So they look away, they cross the street. They suddenly become very interested in their phones. At Emma's school, the other parents avoided him during pickup. He'd stand there in his stained work clothes, smelling like sweat and desperation, while they chatted about their weekend plans and their kids' soccer practices. Nobody invited Emma for playdates anymore. Nobody included her in birthday parties. The isolation was crushing, but the worst part was watching his daughter experience it too. Emma started coming home quiet. She'd always been a chatty kid, full of stories about her day, about what she learned, about who said what at lunch. But now she'd just sit at their small table, picking at her dinner, saying nothing. Marcus knew the other kids were talking. Kids always talk. They repeat what they hear their parents say at home. 3 months after Jennifer left, Marcus hit rock bottom. He'd been evicted from their apartment. They'd been living in his truck for 2 weeks, parking in different places each night, trying to avoid the police. He'd signed Emma up for the free breakfast and lunch program at school, and he made sure she ate both meals fully because he didn't know when their next real meal would be. He'd sold everything they didn't absolutely need. His tools went first, then Jennifer's abandoned jewelry, then his own wedding ring. The pawn shop owner barely looked at him while counting out the bills. Marcus had stopped sleeping. Every night, he'd watch Emma curl up in the back seat of his truck, covered with their only blanket, and he'd feel like the biggest failure in the world. He'd sit in the driver's seat, staring at nothing, wondering how he'd ended up here, wondering if Emma would be better off without him, wondering if he should call social services himself. That Friday evening, Marcus had exactly $14.27 to his name. He needed to make it last until his next paycheck, which was 5 days away. He'd been doing the math all day, trying to figure out how to stretch that money, how to keep Emma fed. They walked into Save Mart, that big chain grocery store on Fletcher Street. Emma held his hand, quiet as always now. Marcus had a list in his mind: bread, peanut butter, maybe some bananas if they were on sale. Cheap, filling food that would last. He grabbed the store-brand bread, the cheapest peanut butter, a bag of apples that were slightly bruised and marked down. Emma wandered to the cereal aisle, and he found her staring at a box of the colorful kind, the ones with the cartoon characters, the kind Jennifer used to buy when money wasn't so tight. She didn't ask for it. She'd stopped asking for things weeks ago. She just looked at it with this expression that broke Marcus completely. He grabbed the box. He couldn't afford it, but he grabbed it anyway. His daughter deserved one normal thing. One small happiness. At the checkout line, Marcus laid out his items while Emma stood beside him, holding that cereal box like it was treasure. The total came to $17.43. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd miscalculated. He started counting his bills, his change, $14.27. That's all he had. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Dorothy, according to her name tag, watched him count. She didn't say anything, just waited with this practiced patience that made it clear she'd seen this situation 1,000 times before. Marcus looked at his items, the bread, the peanut butter, the apples. The cereal, he had to put something back. He reached for the cereal box, and Emma's hand tightened around it. "Daddy," her voice was so small. "It's okay, sweetheart, we'll get it next time." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. There wouldn't be a next time. There was never a next time. Behind him, someone sighed loudly. Marcus felt his face burning. The cashier's expression remained neutral, but he could see it in her eyes. Pity, judgment, that look that said she was tired of dealing with people like him. "Come on, man, some of us have places to be." The voice came from behind him, male, impatient. Marcus's hands were shaking as he tried to decide what to remove. Emma had gone very still beside him. She was 7 years old, and she was learning what shame felt like, what it meant to be the one holding up the line, the one who couldn't afford basic groceries. "Just put the cereal back," Dorothy said quietly. Not unkind, just factual. "That'll bring you to $13.80. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. He reached for the box, and that's when someone else's hand appeared, gently touching his shoulder. Wait. She was probably in her 60s, this woman. She wore a simple blue cardigan and jeans, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. Nothing about her screamed wealth. Nothing about her suggested she was anyone special. She could have been anyone's grandmother, shopping for her weekly groceries. "Let me get that," she said, And before Marcus could protest, before he could find his voice, she'd handed Dorothy a $50 bill. "No, I can't," Marcus started. "You're not," she said firmly. "I'm choosing to. There's a difference." Dorothy rang up the items, added a few more things the woman had in her basket, and handed Marcus his bags. The woman took her own bag and gestured for Marcus to follow her outside. He did, in a daze, with Emma still clutching his hand. Outside, in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights, the woman turned to face him. She studied him for a moment, really looked at him in a way that people hadn't in months. Like he was actually visible. "Actually human. What's your name?" she asked. Marcus Thompson." "I'm Helen Green. This is your daughter." "Emma. Her name's Emma." Helen crouched down to Emma's level. "That's a beautiful name. Do you like the cereal we got you?" Emma nodded, still quiet, still uncertain. Helen stood back up, looking at Marcus again. "You're working?" "Yes, ma'am. Warehouse job. Part-time right now, but I'm looking for something full-time." "What did you do before?" "Construction. I was a foreman for 9 years before the company shut down." Helen nodded slowly. She reached into her purse, pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. "This is my son's company. They do commercial construction and renovation. They're always looking for experienced people. Call this number tomorrow. Ask for David Green. Tell him his mother sent you." Marcus stared at the card. Green and Associates Construction. The address was in the nice part of town, the area with the high-rise buildings and expensive restaurants. "I don't understand," Marcus said quietly. "Why are you helping me?" Helen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. 23 years ago I was you, different circumstances but the same desperation. I was a single mother with 2 kids, living in my car, trying to figure out how to keep going. Someone helped me, a stranger who had no reason to care. He gave me a chance, and that chance changed everything. I swore that if I ever got on my feet, I'd do the same for someone else. I've been watching for the right person, watching for someone who was trying, really trying, despite everything. That's you, Marcus. I can see it. So you're going to call that number tomorrow, and you're going to let me help you the way someone once helped me. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. He'd been holding it together for so long, staying strong for Emma, refusing to break. But standing there in that parking lot with this stranger who saw him, really saw him, he felt tears burning his eyes. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll call. Say you'll show up. Say you'll accept the help you need." "I'll call." "Good." Helen reached into her purse again and pulled out an envelope. She pressed it into Marcus's hand before he could refuse. "This is to get you through the next few weeks. I don't want to hear any arguments. Take it, use it, get yourself and your daughter into a stable situation." Marcus looked down at the envelope, too afraid to open it, too overwhelmed to process what was happening. Helen touched his shoulder gently. "It gets better. I promise you it gets better. But you have to let people help. That's the hardest part for people like us. People who have had to survive on their own for so long. We forget that accepting help isn't weakness, it's courage." She smiled at Emma, touched the little girl's cheek softly, and walked to her car. Marcus and Emma stood there in the parking lot for a long time after Helen drove away. Finally, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was $1,500 in cash and a note. The note said, "For immediate needs, no repayment expected. Just pay it forward someday." Marcus sat down right there on the curb and cried. Emma sat next to him, holding his hand, not understanding everything, but understanding enough. Marcus called David Green the next morning at 9 o'clock sharp. David remembered his mother mentioning meeting someone. They set up an interview for that afternoon. Marcus borrowed a shirt and tie from another warehouse worker, showed up 15 minutes early, and talked about his experience, his skills, his work ethic. David hired him on the spot, full-time position. Good pay, benefits that included health insurance, a signing bonus that would cover a deposit on an apartment. But it was more than just the job. David became a mentor. He taught Marcus about the business side of construction, encouraged him to get his contractor's license, brought him into bigger projects. Within a year, Marcus was running full crews again. Within 2 years, he was a project manager. The money Helen had given him, Marcus used for an apartment deposit and furniture. He found a small 2-bedroom place in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Emma got her own room. She decorated it with drawings and that box of cereal, which she'd insisted on keeping empty on her shelf as a reminder. Emma started smiling again. She made friends at school. She joined the art club and discovered she loved painting. She started talking again, filling their apartment with stories and laughter and the normal noise of childhood. Marcus stayed in touch with Helen. She became like the mother he'd never had. She came to Emma's school events. She taught Marcus about budgeting, about planning for the future, about building credit. She never made him feel small or incapable. She just walked beside him as he rebuilt his life. 3 years later, Marcus had saved enough to start his own small contracting business. He hired people who were like he'd been, skilled workers who'd fallen on hard times, who just needed a chance. He paid fair wages. He offered mentorship. He saw people the way Helen had seen him. Jennifer came back, eventually. She showed up at their door with apologies and regrets, wanting to be part of Emma's life again. Marcus let her because Emma deserved to know her mother, but things were different now. He'd learned that he was enough, that he could do this on his own, that he was stronger than he'd ever known. Ending in twist 5 years after that night in the Save Mart parking lot, Marcus stood in a different grocery store. He was there picking up supplies for Emma's 12th birthday party. His business was thriving. They lived in a nice house now. Emma was in advanced classes at school, talking about becoming an architect someday. He noticed a young woman at the checkout line, counting change with shaking hands. She had a little boy with her, maybe 5 years old. The kid was looking at a candy bar on the display with the same expression Emma had worn looking at that cereal box. The cashier's impatient sigh was familiar. So were the annoyed looks from the people in line behind her. So was the way the woman's face flushed with shame. Marcus didn't hesitate. He stepped forward. "Wait," he said, reaching for his wallet. "Let me get that." The woman looked up at him, startled, grateful, embarrassed. "You don't have to," she started. "I'm choosing to." Marcus said, echoing Helen's words from years ago, "There's a difference." He paid for her groceries and walked with her outside. In the parking lot, he handed her his business card. "I run a construction company. We're hiring for several positions. If you're interested, call this number. Ask for Marcus. I'll make sure we find something that works with your schedule." The woman stared at the card, then at him, tears forming in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus smiled. "Because someone once helped me, and she taught me that what we do for each other, that's what matters. That's what makes the difference." He reached into his wallet and pulled out an envelope. He'd started keeping them prepared, always ready for moments like this. Inside was enough to help someone get through a rough patch, enough to give them breathing room. "This is to get you through the next few weeks. No repayment expected. Just pay it forward someday." The woman's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Her little boy looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. Marcus crouched down to the boy's level. "You take care of your mom, okay? She's doing the best she can. That's all any of us can do." The boy nodded solemnly. As Marcus drove home that evening, he thought about Helen. She'd passed away a year ago, peacefully in her sleep. At her funeral, 17 different people had spoken about how she'd changed their lives, about chances she'd given them, about how she'd seen them when everyone else looked away. Marcus had spoken too. He'd told the story of that night in the parking lot, how one act of kindness from a stranger had cascaded into a completely different life, how she'd taught him that dignity isn't about what you have, but about how you treat people, about recognizing the humanity in everyone, especially those the world has decided don't matter. Emma had asked him once why he helped so many people, why he gave so much away when they'd struggled so hard to get where they were. Marcus had told her about Helen, about being invisible and then being seen, about the difference between surviving and living, about how we're all closer to the edge than we think. and how one person choosing to care can change everything. But what if you help the wrong person? Emma had asked. What if they don't appreciate it or don't do anything with the chance? Marcus had smiled. Then they don't. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to be the person who helps. What they do with it is up to them, but I have to try. I have to be for someone else what Helen was for me. Now, pulling into his driveway, Marcus saw Emma through the window, laughing with her friends who'd arrived early for her party. He thought about how close he'd come to losing her, how close they'd both come to being swallowed by the system, by poverty, by the weight of a world that didn't care. But they hadn't been, because one woman, one stranger, had decided to care. Marcus had learned something crucial in those years. We're all one catastrophe away from being the person in the checkout line counting change. Job loss, illness, divorce, any number of things can push someone from stability into crisis. The difference between him and the people who'd looked away in his darkest moment was just luck and circumstance. So he chose to be the person who looked closer, who stepped forward, who remembered what it felt like to be invisible and made sure others felt seen. That was Helen's real gift, not the money, not the job connection, though those were vital. The real gift was the lesson that our humanity is measured by how we treat those who can offer us nothing in return, that true strength is found in lifting others up, that we're all connected, whether we acknowledge it or not. Marcus walked into his house, into the sounds of celebration and normalcy, into the life he'd rebuilt from nothing. He thought about all the people he'd helped over the years. He thought about all the Helen Greens out there, quietly changing lives with simple acts of kindness. And he thought about the young woman from the grocery store, counting her change and wondering how she'd make it through another day. He hoped she'd call, hoped she'd accept the help, hoped she'd someday be in a position to extend her own hand to someone else who was struggling. Because that's how the world actually changes, not through grand gestures or massive movements, though those have their place, but through individual moments of choosing to see, to care, to help. Through one person deciding that someone else's struggle matters. Through remembering that we're all just humans trying to survive, trying to provide for our families, trying to maintain our dignity in a world that makes it harder every day. Marcus had been the broke single dad everyone ignored. Until one kind stranger refused to look away, and now he was the one refusing to look away from others. The cycle continued, spreading outward in ways Helen would never have imagined when she handed that money to a desperate man in a parking lot. So let me ask you this, when was the last time you really looked at someone who was struggling, not the quick glance and look away, really looked, really saw them as a full human being with a story and dreams and fears just like yours? Drop a comment and tell me, has anyone ever helped you when you needed it most? Or have you been the one to help someone else? Let's share these stories. Let's remind each other that kindness still exists, that people still care, that we're all connected. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently, share it. Because somewhere out there is someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's counting change at a checkout line. Someone who feels invisible. Someone who's wondering if tomorrow is worth facing. Be there, Helen. Be there, Marcus. Be the person who refuses to look away. Subscribe for more true stories about humanity, resilience, and the moments that change everything. Hit that notification bell. And remember, you never know when your small act of kindness might be someone else's turning point. Where are you watching from? What did this story make you feel? Tell me in the comments. Let's build a community of people who see each other, who help each other, who remember that we're all in this together.